Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here tonight. My name is Kelly S. Thompson. I'm the author of Girls Need Not Apply, but here to host tonight Brent's launch of Nothing But Life. So excited to be here. The man has put out 2 books in a pandemic, so he's worthy of eons of celebration just for that. And we're also here to support the Kids Help Phone, so going to be a great night. So I'm going to start with our land acknowledgement and grab my glasses for that. The city of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. The land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabeg to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase, 1792, between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the city of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, North America, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. So, we're excited to be here today, excited to support Brent. And I'll do a couple little, should I get my glasses on? A couple housekeeping items here. So again, today is in support of Kids Help Phone. Brent's book deals with a teenager with trauma. And the Kids Help Phone supports so many children, especially right now in the middle of this pandemic where that need is greater than ever. And so really excited to have them here today. I think Brent was saying $1,000 was reached to donate right before the launch started. So that's really exciting. And what else? There's also tons of great prizes. You can win an incredible stack of books, which I believe there's a photo of later. It is a stack and it's hundreds of dollars of books. You can win the Relay Coffee gift basket. Coffee. What else do you need to know? There are 2 writers, myself included, who have offered a kind of a manuscript consultation for a short story or a small collection of poems. So that's really worthwhile for the writers out there. And what else? We also have, if anyone has any questions for Brent that you want to make sure get answered, make sure you put them in the comments, and those will all be collected at the end, and we'll have Brent answer them at the end of the show. And also a huge thanks to Epic Books, who's selling the local amazing bookseller. You can have Epic Books ships all over Canada, and of course, things are soon opening up a little bit so you can shop in person, and we're excited to have them here. So I'm going to take a quick moment to introduce Jameson Scott, and he's with us here from Kids Help Phone. Jameson's been working with Kids Help Phone for the past 9 years. He's currently one of the development officers for the Ontario region. His role at Kids Help Phone revolves around revenue development, relationship building, and managing or supporting Kids Help Phone fundraising events like this. So Jameson, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Kelly.
Here you are. So we're wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the Kids Help Phone, about its background, its history.
For sure, absolutely. Well, Kids Help Phone is Canada's only 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, 365-day national support service offering professional counseling, information and referrals, and volunteer-led text-based support services to young people in both English and French. We receive probably over 1,400 contacts every single day from across Canada, and on average, activate probably 10 emergency rescues every single day. So that's 10 lives that we're saving every single day across Canada. I'll let you guys do the math about what that equals every single year. Our service is completely confidential. You don't even have to tell us your name. We just want to help you with whatever problems that you're dealing with.
And can you tell us a little bit, we've heard a lot about a rise in need for these kinds of services, for counseling in particular, but in the middle of the pandemic, have you seen a surge like that with calls?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is, it's an interesting time in young people's lives, and young people's lives are always transitioning to something. And it's been very difficult for them to navigate the space right now. So we are definitely seeing a surge of young people reaching out with questions related to COVID, questions related to their future, and just some uncertainties that they're sharing with us. And we're trying to provide them with resources, with information and counseling to help make them feel better and just get them through whatever issue it is that they're dealing with.
Why do you think it is that talking to a stranger works?
I think that there's an anonymity behind our service that young people really enjoy. They're not talking to somebody who they feel might use that information against them or might share that information with somebody that they don't trust. So our confidentiality is definitely one of the hallmarks of our service that young people have championed and really told us works for them. So I think that's definitely one of the reasons.
And access to, every kid has a phone for the most part, right?
Access, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And in some places, in rural places, you know, a lot of times they don't have a lot of community support. So Kids Help Phone literally is the only support available to them. And, you know, if you have a phone, you can text us, you can call us, you can check out our website. There's a number of ways to connect with us, and we're just waiting and willing to talk to anybody.
And I've heard about libraries too, putting kids in contact with Kids Help Phones. So. Absolutely.
Absolutely. There's tons of community resources and community organizations that we work with as well. I think our database is over 26,000 at this point. So we are out there in the community. If you actually look at any Nestle chocolate bar, check out the back of it, you're going to find our number. Well,
thanks so much for joining us, everyone. If you want to donate still, there's still time. I think Brent said the donations were going to be open for a couple more days, and already over $1,000. And let's remember how it helps kids. The link is up on Brent's website. I believe we'll be posting the link again as well. And we're really grateful you joined us. Thanks, Jameson.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you, Brent, for everything you're doing for the young people of Canada. We really appreciate it.
Cheers for Brent. Thanks, Jameson.
Take care.
So with no further ado, let's have Brent.
Hey. Hello, everyone.
I'm
thank
honored.
You so much, Kelly, and thank you, Jameson, for that. It's absolutely my pleasure, to be here with everybody, but more importantly, using a tiny platform of mine to help raise funds for this amazing charity. Yeah, it's just great to be here. I would like to take a moment, if I could, just to introduce a few people, just to say hello. There's a number of people who are quote unquote backstage here. Just people who have basically been my launch people. So Dennis, if you could bring everybody up, I'll run through. Let's start with Heather, if we could. I'd like to introduce my publicist from Dundurn, Heather, first.
Yay! Oh.
Feedback going here. That's me, actually. Okay. Not sure what that's all about.
It made it really dramatic, though.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Hey. Congratulations. Whoa. That's me. Congratulations, Brad.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you for everything. This has been it's been quite a ride, eh? I mean, my goodness. Could we plan things any more dramatically?
Apparently not.
All right, Dennis, if you could bring everybody else up. I'll just introduce, this is Sharon, my sister, who's helping out with some of the background stuff as well, Sharon Porty. And then there's Jamie from Epic Books, who has been my bookseller for Boy, as well as this launch. So once again, just a reminder that Epic is an amazing bookseller. She can ship across Canada. The books are signed, which right now is kind of a cool thing. And then there's Heather as well. And then, of course, you met Jameson. Let's bring Jameson up. Thank you again for being here, and thank you for all of your background support. And let's see if we can raise some more money tonight. It would be great. I know that we have gotten over $1,000, which is pretty exciting. Just before the broadcast, we passed that milestone, so that's just really cool. Thank you very much, everybody. And also, I'll just give a shout out to Jason Hofing of Relay Coffee, who couldn't be here tonight. He has put up a prize as well. And just thanks, Dennis. You can let everybody go off to their beverages and snacks. Oh, and my brother Dennis. Sorry, I forgot to introduce him as well. He's a tech guy this time again, and he's been pretty great for me. Below the video in the description of your broadcast, either in YouTube or Facebook, there's a couple of links there. The first link, of course, is the link to make a donation to the Kids Help Phone, and I'm just I think they were getting a little glitchy here, so I'm gonna There we go. There's a link to the Kids Help Phone where you can donate directly to the fund and a chance to win that huge stack of books, which I can bring up the picture for that one now, actually. There it is, 12 books from all of our sponsors, which is pretty cool. Take that one off, and there I am again. And then the other link underneath there is a link for people who are either writers who are tuned in and or Hamiltonians, because Jason from Relay Coffee has again helped me with my launch and is donating another gift basket of coffee. There's a link there to enter that draw, as well as a link for the writers to enter for one of 2 writing mentorships. So if you have a story or an essay or something that you'd like some help with, Kelly S. Thompson, my wonderful MC, is volunteering her time with that, as well as my friend Steph Cilia Vandermeulen, both excellent editors. You're in very, very good hands there. So if you're interested in that, just follow the instructions on that link, enter your email address, and then I will do a draw along with all the other draws after the launch. Okay, housekeeping of my own. So Dennis, can you bring Kelly back up? This is really exciting. I just wanted to give a very special thank you to my friend Kelly. Yeah, you've been wonderful, and I'm really looking forward to the questions you have in store for us.
Well, the lovely thing is I'm also an insane fan of yours, Brent. So boy, Saints Unexpected, Nothing But Life, endless short stories. I used to read your short stories in lit mags before I ever got published and be like, this guy. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. Thank you. This is great.
So we want a reading.
Sorry, go ahead.
We want a reading from you.
All right.
So I'm excited.
We've had a few little technical things going on behind here. So I'm going to read the opening chapter of Nothing But Life. I've been dipping in and out, trying to fix little things here and there. So I may have missed whether the description was already made of the book. But the book's about a kid in crisis, which is very applicable to the fundraising we're doing for it. Dills has come back to Hamilton with his mom to try and get a fresh start after escaping the horrors of the Windsor High shooting. The real crux of the story is that his stepdad, Jesse, was the one who actually committed the crime. And so not only is he escaping, and Dills, my main character, was involved in the shooting as well. He was a victim, is a victim. He's not only escaping that, he is also escaping this terrible legacy that his stepfather has left for him. And it's complicated because he loves his stepfather. He can't hate him, even though he's done this terrible thing. And Jesse's voice has followed him to Hamilton as well, and he can't get away from that either. And at the beginning of the novel, Dills, my main character, he hurts somebody in his class. So we get a sense that he has this lingering trauma, and in a moment of weakness, he lashes out at a bully named Pat and hurts him badly enough to get dragged in front of the court system. He hurts him with a knife. And so the judge hands him a summer of community service as a way of making up for this infraction that he's committed. So I'm going to read from the start of the novel. And I think that's a good place to start. But that's the setup for the book. And now you can really see why the Kids Help Phone is such a great link for this, because my main character is a youth in crisis, which is precisely what the Kids Help Phone is there to help. So here I go. Chapter 1, Graduation. I plead guilty, of course. It's the only option. No one else used a box cutter on Patrick Schultz 10 days ago in math class, during the last regular period before our end-of-year exams. Now, I'm not that great at math, but these numbers are easy. 8 stitches, 27 witnesses, 7 days before summer freedom. 1,000 times I've told myself how dumb it was to lose my cool. The youth court judge, a stern-looking woman no one in their right mind would mess with, asks me if I understand the consequences of pleading guilty. I nod, but she makes me say it out loud. I understand, Your Honor. Then she clears the courtroom of everyone but me, Mom, the lawyers, the court reporter, my youth worker, and the bailiff, who sits in the chair at the end of my table. Even Grandma Jan and Aunt Viv have to go. The prosecution lawyer starts to object. He thinks Patrick and his parents should be allowed to stay, but the judge silences him with a look over her reading glasses. I'll bring them back in for sentencing, but there's something I need to talk to Wendell and his mother about first. First time she's called me Wendell. Until now, I've been the defendant. I think about what that could mean as I watch everyone file out of the courtroom. Patrick, who everyone calls Pat, which he hates, glares at me as he leaves. A single person remains in the gallery, a woman who's been scribbling madly in her notebook the entire time. You too, Miss Walters, the judge says. Judge, especially you. The woman frowns but gets up without another word and leaves. The judge sighs and nods at the bailiff. Watch the door, please. I don't want anyone accidentally bursting back in. I can tell the judge is talking about Walters, a reporter from the local paper, which my mom calls that right-wing rag, who lives in my neighborhood. The bailiff gives a small smile and heads to the door. He shares the judge's opinion. The judge removes her reading glasses, looks down, and takes a long, deep breath. Her eyes are softer when she looks up and over at the table where I'm sitting. I've seen that kind of look before. It's how people who weren't there look when they talk about it. All helplessness and sadness. She's going to talk about Windsor. My lawyer brought it up in the defense, but I was hoping it would stay locked up in the court records. But no. Now the judge will say my full name again and want me to talk about it. But I won't. I won't tell anyone. Not in a way that they want, anyway. I have memories that live inside my head that are just for me. I was in the Windsor High Library when the shooter walked in and opened fire. I didn't see much while it was happening. I was behind a table with my eyes closed. I heard the angry sounds of the bullets destroying everything around me. And the other noises I can't talk about. We all did. The shooter was my stepdad, Jesse. I found that out later at home at the same time my mom did, when the police came to interview her. And me. I also found out that Jesse went to my classroom first. My classroom. I don't know why. He didn't leave a note or anything. After the shooting, in the strange quiet of our house, I tried to figure it out. Mom hid the TV remote, but there were dozens of reconstructions on the internet. Hashtags and protests and rage, and so many people wanting to fight. So much information, but so few answers. Computer-generated animations and diagrams and arrows and dotted lines and red X's wherever someone had died. Kids and teachers. The horrible math of that. But I can't say the number. I hope that's all right. The judge coughs gently. A few things have come to light since you were charged, she says, including the fact that you were at Windsor High School on the day of the shooting. When I call everyone back in, I'm going to pass sentence, but I wanted to tell you in private how sorry I am for what you've gone through, and how much I respect your mother for bringing you home to Hamilton for a fresh start. I've spoken to your math teacher and principal, who both speak very highly of you, and we talked about your situation. They, of course, had no idea. I sneak a look back at Mom. She's leaning forward on the gallery bench, her arms folded, looking at the judge with narrowed eyes. My lawyer using Windsor is one thing, but Mom won't like that the principal and my teacher now know too. She made me promise not to say anything to anyone. Not that I would. Not that I can. I turn back to the front of the courtroom. The judge is still talking. You'll be relieved to hear that your expulsion has been reversed and you'll be allowed to graduate from grade 10 after all. Quietly, of course. They feel that this one mistake shouldn't keep you from moving forward. I agree. Your school records will be filed away with full confidentiality, which is important to you and your mother. And by law, these court records will also be sealed. Wendell, I sincerely hope you and your mom can find some peace here. You're a strong young man, and I'm lucky to have met you, despite the circumstances. She leans back and puts her glasses back on. That said, you broke the law, so what happens next is very, very important. And with that, the judge nods at the bailiff and he opens the door and everyone comes back in. I force my eyes open to stay open to keep them dry. I never cry, but I get close a lot. My eyes fill all the time. I can't look back at Mom right now because she'll be a mess. Like me. I can't hear the word Windsor without my insides twisting themselves into ropes. But she feels it worse. She feels everything. That's it. Thank
because you can't hear it otherwise, so I'll do it for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We're all doing it. That was brilliant, and yet the gorgeous start to your beautiful book. So need my glasses on again. So I'm so excited to talk to you about this book. I read it really greedily all in one night, actually.
Wow.
And
that's great.
You've done such a variety of genres. I mean, you've done collections of short stories, you've done literary novels, you've written some nonfiction essays that have been published, and now YA. So I guess, do you have a favorite, but also why YA this time?
I don't have a favorite. I guess by the volume of my work, I guess I would say that I'm most comfortable writing for adults. But that said, this is a story that, and to answer your second question at the same time, this is a story that just demanded that a teenager tell it, and for teenagers. I had a number of starts on it. I had a number of different voices and different people telling the story, but it really wasn't really settling well until I read a poem called entitled 26 by Rachel Eliza Griffiths. About the Newtown shooting of that terrible tragedy and the kids in that school. And the opening line of that poem is, "Your name's toll in my dreams." And that pretty much wrecked me by itself. But then I read the rest of it. And she's got an incredible poem. Sorry, I've just kind of lost my train of thought remembering the power of those words a bit. But there's a line, and the title of the book comes from a line that says, "Nothing but life dares dying." And there's so much hope and tragedy in that one line that it takes life to recognize that it's gone. It takes a life to, the power of a life to really shine when even through tragedy. And I just started really working through that. And suddenly I had kind of an idea of what I wanted to do with this. And I knew that it wasn't the actual shooting that I wanted to tell about. It was the echoes of it, those terrible shadows that were cast for so long. And then I had a direction. And why a YA? I don't know. Yeah, just it came out that way. I know it sounds a little bit camp to say it that way, but honestly, I couldn't have written this one to completion in any other way.
Well, like you said, a teen had to tell it. So
yeah. He did. He was whispering in my ear. He and Jesse started breathing, as I said on the Dundurn website. They started breathing a few years ago in a short story called Skinks, which is narrated by a much younger narrator. That voice didn't work. But those two characters and the idea, Jesse had not committed a school shooting in that story, but he had done something really bad that Dills had no idea what it was. He just knew that everybody was talking about it and saying really bad things about his hero. So the characters have been living for a while. So I've been working with them, and Dills whispered at me a lot about how he would like me to allow him to tell that story. And sometimes you just got to let the muse, or in this case, a teenager whispering in your ear, direct you into how to tell a story.
Some characters haunt us.
They do.
Yeah.
They really do.
And so how did you manage the voice of a teen? Because I don't know about you, but sometimes I teach teenagers and they tell me I sound like I'm 95. So how did you manage to get yourself into the head of a teenager, and how that voice was different from your other characters, like Boy, for example?
I did simplify the language. Dills narrates this story in a very simplistic, short sentences, almost fragmented kind of way. And that's partly because of how he's processing things on the go. I kind of lost your question, actually. Sorry.
Just that how you manage the voice of a teen, because I can't. Like, I just can't do it. So I was really impressed by how I felt like I was listening to a teen talk. And I guess how? Because you don't have teens, you have young children.
Yeah, and I think what I was going to say was it wasn't a matter of sort of quote unquote dumbing down the language.
Yeah.
It was writing it in a way that was approachable, both for the fact that Dills was the one having to say it. He needed to be able to say these words. So in that sense, it was a less formal structure of language that I was using for this one. But in no means do I think that gives me permission not to write really nice words. I want to try and write poetry, even if it's plainer poetry, if that makes any sense at all.
I would say mission accomplished on this one.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you and I both actually have a military background, and we share that together. And so no strangers to trauma and the impacts of trauma, which is such a big theme in your book. And of course, so does Jesse, so does Dills. So how did you write about, I mean, not to ask you to bury your traumas of any form or shape, but how do we tell stories about trauma in a way that feels supportive of telling the story while also kind of holding your character's hand? Because I thought you did that very eloquently.
On a very practical level, I didn't want to dwell on the tragedy itself. So in that sense, it was easier for me a little bit to tell that terrible story because I didn't want to dwell too much on the day of the tragedy. There is some detail in the book, but others have written about it so much better than I possibly could have. And so once I realized, and again, it was partially due to this magnificent poem, 26, once I realized that I could focus on those echoes I mentioned earlier and those shadows, it was easier for me to write, because a lot of the research that I encountered, and one of the reasons I found that poem was because the stuff that I was reading and seeing and listening to was so horrible and so hard. I just needed to find a sort of creative context. I went out of that horrible material and found something beautiful. And I the how of that difficult subject matter, I realized that I had a way to focus on the tragedy and the horror of it, but in a very intimate way that didn't dwell on the gory details and that moment. I've often been focused on, in my writing, the peripheral stories, the lingering stories, rather than sort of the main event, if you will. And this was no different. I really wanted to figure out what a kid like Dills, what he would do when faced with this situation, not in the moment, but afterwards, and how to process that this person that he loved had done this thing. And I wanted to explore the later moment where he was going through all of that. And when it comes to Jesse, I think it's a real delicate dance I had to do about acknowledging that he did this horrible thing, but I really wanted to give him some humanity as well. And that is why I made him a sympathetic character, which is odd to say for somebody who did what he did, but he is Dills' hero. He teaches him everything he needs to know. He's a father figure to Dills in a very real way. And I think by giving those difficult things complexity, it really allowed me to approach the difficult subject matter in a way that gives it some grace, and that gives these characters rooms to explore. Probably me too. Again, as I said, there are things I still can't go back to when I think about some of the things I researched when it came to this story, when I didn't yet know how to tell it. It allowed me to tell it in a way that allowed me some grace too. And I think that's pretty special. I hope I answered your question. I feel like I may have, but yeah.
It was also a rather loosey-goosey question, but I like where you took it.
Thanks.
Yeah. Something I really loved of many things in the book was your ability to, and this is something I've noticed in all your writing, your secondary, even tertiary characters are so alive on the page. They're not just like tossed in. Everyone is so real. Aunt Viv, his mom, Sean, Gall, Mia. So you also in that process are challenging a lot of stereotypes. So Gall is an immigrant and challenging stereotypes around the way we view people of color. And Mia is a wrestler and really muscly. And so she's challenging our typical idea of femininity. So was that a conscious choice? And I guess this is a two-parted question, so I will follow up to remind you as this is running on. But
thank you,
I guess
I've forgotten two of them already. So.
I mean, in terms of, first of all, do you sit with each character and sort of hash them out on the page what you want them to be in terms of digging into their backstory? Because they all have such a rich backstory. Or is it something that more comes out organically for you in the process of writing?
It first comes out organically. I kind of let the characters do what they will. And the more I get to know them, the more I understand that I will have to build complexity into them. One of the neat things about this story is it's actually set in my actual neighborhood. And so I have this very real place where all of these incredibly different people live. And I always, when writing, I always enjoy setting opposites against each other in either as foils or as opponents or, you know, villains and heroes, all of those kinds of opposites, that duality. I always like doing that with characters, even secondary ones. You can't spend the whole book on it because you don't want them to distract from perhaps the main point. But with regards to Gal and Mia, for example, as soon as I started writing about Gal, who's an Israeli, and then I was writing about this girl, she, again, it sounds so weird to say this, but she really told me she needed to be Palestinian. And there needed to be something between these two that reflected the complexity of that situation. Because while there are some very plain stories, I don't think there are any easy ones in the real world. I think everybody carries a lot of difficulty and a lot of backstory into everything that they do. And a neighborhood is full of those stories. And really, this story is populated with people in the neighborhood who are just really interesting. I had to cut a few out actually in drafting, but I think I was left with some pretty interesting stories still.
And when it comes to challenging stereotypes as well, like I said, Mia, for an example, she's described as really muscular. She's sort of ostracized by the other girls for this reason because she's kind of in this guy's sport. And so, what was it about her character that made Dills feel safe? That's the feeling I got, that she made him feel safe, not like she would protect him, but that he was safe. His heart was safe with her.
Well, she was, again, breaking the stereotype of that simple story of Israel-Palestine. So in terms of the first part of your question, she was that complexity that, you know, everybody brings that piece of story to everything that they do. But Dills is a very simple person. He's not tough and rough. He's not savvy. He's not with it. He doesn't have a quick answer for every adult who asks him a question. He's quite vulnerable. And so I wanted somebody, again, to sort of be a contrast to that, somebody he could almost admire without realizing he was admiring that. And then I started writing her, and I wanted to make her strong. And I enjoy making characters that can lift the world on their shoulders in general. I think that's pretty cool. And I wanted her to be a wrestler. So again, as a Palestinian daughter, we don't go into her background too much. Like I don't go into the religious question of it too much. But again, having a very, very strong, very bold, very dress how she would like to dress Palestinian daughter, I thought that was a nice way to break some of those stereotypes we encounter a lot, of that every daughter of people from Muslim countries, for example, every daughter is, you know, somehow not free to do what she wants. And yeah, there's tension with her parents. I mean, everybody has tension with their parents who don't want them to do anything. But I like the fact that she is able to push against some of those preconceptions that a lot of people would have about a Palestinian girl, in a Palestinian young woman, I should say, in that kind of situation. So that was also really interesting. I really enjoyed making her character, I guess, wrestle her way out of some of those boxes that people might put her into.
I really wanted to be her friend. Like I wanted to hang out with her. Didn't she feel
really
like
cool.
someone you'd hang out with?
Yeah, my friend Allison, I was on Junction Reads the other night as well, and she also really identified with Mia. Well, that's really great. I don't think there's a greater compliment that a writer can get than one of their characters, hopefully more, but one in particular, you know, like you get that sense that people really connect with that character, and that character really speaks into their lives. And that's such an incredible compliment. And so thank you. But it's great. So I really want to say, you know, part of me wants to talk about the organic part of this experience. And well, she just came out and she was magical from the start. But really it is something that I have really worked at, and to have that recognized is quite nice. So thank you for that.
Oh gosh, my pleasure. And on that note, you have so many wonderful, vibrant, rich female characters in your book. And they're often the really strong ones that we can admire. And I was wondering if you had a matriarchal influence in your life that led to these, like Dill's mom, Aunt Viv, Grandma. They're all like, they're such punchy, they really leap off the page as characters. So did you have an influence, or were these modeled after people in your life? Or how did you write such amazing women?
They're not direct caricatures of anyone that I know specifically. I do have a couple of people in the neighborhood that kept coming into my brain when I pictured Grandma Jan and Aunt Viv and his mom. Just that visual image. But what I also really liked about he lives in a house full of women, these 3 women, and it's him. And it's a nexus for him to lean on, and he really does. And it's never in question, is it? He's just got strong women in his life, and I do too. So I can't say that none of the women in my life have influenced me. I married an incredibly strong woman, but I wouldn't say she's caricatured in the book for sure. So I've had lots of strong women in my life. So subconsciously, it's probably an homage to all of them, I guess, all of those wonderful women who have been incredibly strong for me and around me, I guess. But yeah, it really wasn't that intentional. I didn't say, aha, Aunt so-and-so is going to be Aunt Viv. And I don't have any grandparents left, but none of my grandparents are Grandma Jan. And my mother is not Mom, and all of those things. So,
oh, of course. And really, though, it was reflected that you had a grasp of a female character, which as a woman is really exciting to me. I was like, Brent's got this down.
Well, thanks. This story just kind of told itself. It didn't. It took a lot of work.
I was going to say, I think you worked at this one.
I have to acknowledge the work, but in terms of the characters, I think more than any of the books I've written so far, my characters in this book really whispered in my ear quite intimately, and they were very much there from the get-go. The vision for this book was always to tell a strong story, and the characters really came out quite organic. Oh, there's that word again. They really did. They came, and once I knew that they were there, they took the work, of course, but it just got populated by all sorts of interesting people, like life, right? Like my life is full of interesting people, such as yourself and all the good people helping me with the launch, and readers and other writers, my tribe and family and friends, et cetera, et cetera. So
something I really noticed about the book is Dills makes a recognition, even if he doesn't quite notice he's made this recognition at a very young age, that we can love people who do bad things. And it's a realization that some of the adults in his life haven't even made yet. What do you think is the overall moral of the story in that way? Because there's so many beautiful themes that are all coming together here, but a lot of these characters have done bad things and hurt people. So I was kind of looking at redemption, and how does this all come together for you as a theme? What was the moral you felt like if you were Dills, what he would be walking away with from his experience? I'm trying so hard to not give away plot things.
Sure. Yeah. But once I knew that Jesse was not going to be just a straight villain, he is to a lot of people, and that's like life. But I really, that research took me to some horrid places, but it also took me to some really interesting places in terms of who is left behind. And I really wrestled with the fact that so many of those secondary stories really didn't get told fairly. So, the mother of the shooter, for example, or they are the villains by association. And I wondered, well, what about a child of a shooter? And what happens if the shooter did this thing? We don't know exactly why, but we get a sense that maybe he wasn't entirely in control. What if he's not actually a bad person and he just happened to do this unthinkable thing? What would that do to someone in his life? And so for me, that's the most powerful thing that I take away from the book, that we can, one of the characters in the books, I think it's Aunt Viv, who says, people hate what they don't understand, and I think I'm probably paraphrasing her, but, and that's probably what I take away most, is that hate is pretty complicated stuff. And there's a lot of people that we might expect that people do hate, but not everybody would, like Jesse will never stop being Dill's stepfather. Right. It was a delicate thing too, because, you don't want to assume that everybody's going to be looking at Jesse as a hero through all of this. And Dill certainly doesn't. He's really mad at him. Dill, and for those who haven't read the book yet, Jesse is still alive, but in a vegetative state in a Windsor hospital. And Dill hears his voice saying, "Come see me." You get this sense from that Jesse needs this closure. And Dills is constantly fighting against that, saying, "I don't hate you, but you did this thing. And why did you come to my classroom first? Why did you do that?" But there's no hate there, even though everybody expects him to. So I think that is what continually comes back to me when I think about, if I was to explain this to people in one sentence, it would very easily be, hate's a really complex thing. And don't assume that something that you might hate is being hated just because it's something that's horrible.
Okay, can I ask one more? More.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, one more before we turn to comments, and then I'll let everyone else get in. But something I really noticed about the book was that Dills is really stifling a lot of how he's feeling. He talks about it, and of course he's narrating, so we get a lot of how he's feeling about things, but we don't get a lot. He doesn't like to talk, like you said. He says he gets very close to crying, but then he doesn't cry. So I wondered about your research as it related to trauma, if you looked at how it related to how someone would respond. And of course, people respond differently to all different forms. But I'm curious about the research that you had to do, because it must have, as you said, taken you to some dark places. Yeah.
And again, you and I both have service. And so we have people in our lives who carry a lot of trauma with them every day. And so I have, through another project that I've been working on, I've been interviewing veterans and finding out about their trauma. Dill's, his own trauma is, it's keeping him from processing. It's complex. And like every other person who suffers, excuse me, I'm gonna drink of water. I can't even say.
We're picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah. For every person who suffers through trauma, and especially those who suffer through PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, there's no one way to suffer, right? There's just like there's no one way to treat it. There's no one way to live. And so this is very much Dill's way of approaching that trauma. And so my research taught me that there's no one way. So I had a lot of license, actually, when it came to the kinds of symptoms he experienced, and Jesse too, because he's obviously got trauma from what he carried away from his time in the military. So I had a lot of license to be able to give Dill's his own way of processing what was happening. And one of the things that he is not able to do is to say the number, or he finds it really hard to actually speak the trauma. He can talk about it, he can talk about how he's feeling, but he, like I couldn't do, I guess, he can't identify the detail of it very easily. It's there, and he knows it's there. I mean, he carries a bullet fragment around with him. He has a bullet fragment that he carried away from Windsor. So he knows, but that's one of his symptoms, is that he just doesn't, and that's not an uncommon one, that being unable to verbalize the trauma is it can be almost impossible for people who have been through trauma to do that. So he has a number of things, and I've focused on the one thing here, but yeah.
He was beautifully written and really beautifully complex. All your characters, though, were so wonderfully complex. But I really felt like it ended with a lot of hope and positivity and camaraderie, you know, like, to use the military term, but the way the teams come together, the way he comes together with his family, I thought it was a really powerful thing.
Cool.
And I'm so glad you wrote it. I just adore it. And I guess I'll let other people ask their questions.
Well, actually, if I may, before we go to the audience,
yes,
you have actually a link to the Kids Help Phone as well. And before when I was first asking you to do this, I had no idea about this. So this was a serendipitous bit of happenstance that came out later on, that you yourself actually have an experience with the Kids Help Phone. And I was wondering, could you talk a little bit about that? I want to keep, and I do want to focus on our donations and all of those things, but it was such a thing to leap out at me as we were getting close to launch time, that not only is my MC a veteran, not only has she written a wonderful book, not only has she, will she be an excellent reader, but she actually has firsthand knowledge about what we're trying to do. I thought that was a really interesting connection.
We just get each other, Brent. What can I say? But yeah, I called I would have been maybe 13, and it was a pretty, I wouldn't say new, but I mean, it was this thing that felt really exciting to a lot of people talking about it at school. But I really struggled with anxiety and depression, and still do. And so while now I have access to counseling, you don't have that as a kid, and you don't feel really comfortable going to your parents necessarily, or doctors. So I called, and there's a lot to be said for just feeling like someone listens to you. And so that was something I thought a lot about, Dills, as I was reading, and in my own situation, what it means to feel seen by adults around you. And I feel like you really conveyed that well. So part of the reason why I was so honored to be asked to be a part of tonight. Team Brent.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yes. And again, to everybody watching, thank you for being here, of course. And I'll just put this up. If you still haven't made a donation, Dennis got that up for me. Thank you, sir. Go to either the link in the description below the video you're watching, or you can go to my website, brettvaness.com, and follow the links there. Either way, please do. And it would be great. I've heard my email chime a few times since we have started this thing, and I've seen new donations. So thank you to those of you who have donated. It's going to be a bit of a fun surprise at the end to see how we did. And again, that stack of books. All right. So, so before we go to the audience Q&A, again, I'm just going to really say thank you to Kelly. You knocked it out of the park. I appreciate your support, and thank you so much for helping me out with this. It's really, really great. Thank you so much.
It's been such an honor.
Cool. All right. So maybe, Dennis, if you can bring Sharon up, and she can let us know if anybody has put questions in the comments.
You have to thank your sponsors, Brent.
I do. Thank you. Yes, thank you for the reminder. Thank you to our sponsors. There's actually a couple more. I'm realizing now I left out Simon & Schuster. But thank you to my publisher, Dundurn, who has published 2 of my books now. What a thing to have a publisher who's backed you that way. So thank you so much. Thank you to Epic Books, who's been my bookseller for both my launches, and who's an amazing local bookseller, but also an incredible advocate for local writing and writers, and such a champion of the local literary scene. So thank you for that. Thank you to Jason at Relay Coffee for your support, for donated gift baskets, but also putting bookmarks for the launch in with your deliveries, and just being really great. You make good coffee as well. I'm just glad to have you on board. Thank you to my first publisher, Invisible, who threw in a book, 3 books actually, to donate in the book stack. Penguin Random House, J.H. Gordon Books, The City and the City Books as well. J.H. Gordon and City and the City are both also excellent local booksellers who have donated to the book stack as well, and who are also, as always, an incredible advocate for local writers. Not to mention a great place to buy books. So if you like to read, I do. Yeah. So there we go. Thanks, Dennis, for the reminder. And let's bring Sharon up.
And getting us started. If anyone else has other questions, please feel welcome to pop them in there and we'll see how many we can include tonight. Her question was, Brent, what was something that you learned about yourself while writing Nothing But Life?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I learned a lot. No, I learned specifically, and again, I'll give another nod to Rachel's incredible poem 26. And if it is on my website, a link to it. I just learned the power of art to be a really excellent way to color my research about terrible things. It's incredible what people create in response to everything. I think art is an incredible resource and an incredible thing for all of us. But when it comes to the unspeakable or the unthinkable, particularly when it comes to like school shootings or mass shootings or other tragedies of that scale, when people go to their pen to write poetry or to their easel to paint or to write music as a way of finding some way through that grief or that trauma, I think I feel a bit like I was open with a can opener a bit on this. I've always loved to write for as long as I can remember, and I've appreciated art. But art for the first time just completely disassembled me and taught me that there is a glimmer of goodness even through the most horrible things. That's a hard thing to admit sometimes. And I certainly would not want to de-emphasize or belittle the incredible trauma and horrors that people have gone through. But people are beautiful too. And people can be extremely wonderful in the face of things that are the opposite of wonderful. So there's a strength there that I'm really thankful for. So if I had to pick one thing, because there were lots, but that one continually comes back to me.
That's great.
Who asked that question? Sorry, you were cut off at the beginning.
That was Christina Jagger.
Okay, thanks, Christina.
Yeah, no, I think like there's always like this story within the story, right? And we, in the news, you always hear one side of a story. And we often completely miss the aftermath, but the lead up to the aftermath. And your character is, in many ways, he's both the victim of the crime. He's also the collateral damage as the family member, but he's also harmed someone else, which is kind of creating this trauma within the trauma. So I for that individual and those that may have been around for that, I just thought it was really interesting, the different layers of that you added in there.
Yeah, what just occurred to me, I didn't really think about what my sister, the social worker, would say and how she would approach reading this book. We'll have to talk a little more. That's oh, by the way, and Sharon is a social worker, so yeah.
Yeah, I was super excited that you were supporting Kids Help Phone because they're so central in like the supports that are available for teens today. I think it's just so awesome that you've been able to twin that together tonight.
Yeah, it's completely non-judgmental and just open, right? Mm-hmm. You just grab whatever is closest to you that you communicate with and reach out, and that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
So thanks. Were there any other questions?
Yep. So Dave Parkinson's piped in. He's wondering what's next for you, or is that a stay tuned question that we don't get to know about yet?
Oh, wow. Well, I have one of the things that I've been very blessed to continue even through the massive fragmentation that this pandemic has wrought upon us. I've been able to keep my writing routine. So I will have other things. I actually completed a manuscript, another YA manuscript, a younger, I think, a little bit. So that is hopefully going to find a home. I have a thriller manuscript I wrote a few years ago that I hopefully will find a home. I am currently writing something which is going to be very different again from what I've already done. More details about that to come. But I also mentioned very offhandedly, I've been working on a novel about Canadian peacekeepers in the 1990s, and I've been working on that for about 10 years now. And I was also able to finish a draft of the first part of that novel. And I'm going to let it sit in the virtual drawer so I know what to do with it next. I don't really know how to shape it, but lots on the go. And then very concretely, I'm also very blessed to say that I was able to sell a book during the pandemic. So Guernica Press will be putting out my collection of short stories next year in 2022. So I got to say this writer is feeling pretty blessed. It's been a slog, and I continue to just enjoy my my quiet morning time where I can put hopefully beautiful words on the page. There will be more. So stay tuned. Thanks for that question. Yeah. In fact, I should be getting to work on my my short story collection with Guernica in the next month or two. So
That's great. I do admire your diligence in doing all of this, especially with the pandemic and everything that's, takes our time and takes our attention. And you're probably the most like structured person to be able to be writing and to be writing a breath, like different things during all of this. I just think that's really admirable.
Well, ask me about my reading habits during the pandemic. A very different story. I have a attention span the size of a wingspan of a gnat, but
yes,
that's changed. But no, my writing habits, since I had that ahead of time, I was able to keep going with that. Plus, I think it's a real escape for me. It's just a wonderful. I say this a lot, actually. Writing is the one thing in my life, other than love and family and my faith. Writing is the only thing that I never procrastinated at. It was always the thing that I wanted to get right to. So. Yeah. True confession to all my college and university professors who received things that probably weren't as good as I could possibly give them, only because I was always busy putting poetry down on the page or finishing a short story it's been a real source of joy for me. So that has kept me going as well. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Any other questions?
No, I think that's it for the questions in the chat. I'm curious though, wonderful. One last one here. Are you going to write about the pandemic at some point? Will you weave that in somehow?
Ooh, tough one. I don't want to. I don't really want to.
We're all sick of it.
I am desperately sick of it, as everyone else is. And yet I can't say no. I have a feeling there will be things that I will need to write about. Maybe just having gone through testing as many times as I have. How many times I've had the thing up my nose. Worth writing about, I guess. Plus, as an extension of that, I don't want to make light of the overall situation because it's been an incredible trauma for not only our country but the world, and I just can't be realistic if I was to say it will never work its way in. How? That's the real question. I don't have the urge to write explicitly about it, but I think it's too big to ignore, and I think it's going to be working its way out of our pores for a long, 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 long time. So we shall see.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Let me check my order of ceremonies. And I think we're good. Oh, and we're right at the hour mark. So what I will do is I will bring Kelly back on for a moment if I can, if she's still there, and say again, thank you. So everybody give a virtual clapping to Kelly, and then again, a virtual clapping, round of applause as they do like this, a round of applause to my launch people, my publisher, and I also have to, my family, Rosalie, Alida, and Nora. You guys have spoiled me rotten today. Again, I could not do what I do with safety and security without knowing that you were there letting me do that and encouraging me to do that. Sharon, I have to add that to my answer, that knowing that my family are my biggest supporters was what got my butt in the chair here to write in this office every morning. And it will continue to do so. Thank you to my parents and my church community and so many people. Thank you to Dennis, especially who's running the tech show. There's just so many, and I'm just so grateful to have everybody. Thank you again, Kelly. And thank you to the readers and to the people out there. Please think about, if you haven't already done so, think about a donation. And I will be doing those draws. Probably not tonight. I think I'm going to kick back with a glass of something nice and just unwind. But I will be doing those draws very soon, probably tomorrow or the next day. Find out who won that massive stack of books. And thank you to the Kids Help Phone for just being an unbelievable resource and forging through this difficult time. So many charities have been really feeling the strain, and I know Kids Help Phone is no different. So thank you to everyone who's donated, and thank you for this charity to keep doing the wonderful work that they are doing. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. I wish you all the best. Stay healthy, and I'll see you next year, hopefully, for the book launch of Cut Road, my short story collection. So thank you again. Good night, everybody.